The Land of Triangles, Chapter 1. Kevin McFadden leaned forward in his deck chair. Anxiety showed on his sunburnt, freckled face. If Tracy hadn't caught that 20-pounder yesterday, it wouldn't be so bad, he complained to his friend Jason in a low voice. Now I'm the only one who hasn't caught anything. Yeah, too bad a girl had to beat you, agreed Jason. The boys sat silently for a time, gazing at the long, low swells on the Atlantic Ocean. They were on the high deck of the 26-foot cruiser Partners All. A gust of breeze ruffled Kevin's sun-bleached, white-blonde hair, but had no effect on Jason's shorter cut. "Oh, well, you're sure to catch something today," said Jason, as he stood and stretched his well-muscled, tan body. "I'm going down to see if breakfast is ready." Jason watched with open admiration as Jason started down the ladder. Jason excelled at everything and was good-looking, too. At 13, he was already 5.5 feet tall. Kevin was 2 months older than his friend, but nearly a foot shorter and good at nothing. He couldn't even catch a stupid fish. He wouldn't have minded so much if he hadn't seen his father's disappointment. Kevin was always disappointing his father. His dad wanted him to be good at sports, but since he was small for his age and didn't even like sports very much, he'd never been good at anything. And then there was this trip. Right from the beginning, Kevin had been scared. He was only a little nervous about going out into the ocean, but why did they have to choose this location? There had been books written about all the ships and people who had vanished from the Bermuda Triangle, and nobody had ever figured out why it happened. Why tempt fate? Kevin kept saying, but none of them paid any attention. In fact, his dad sounded really disgusted with him when he told him to leave it alone. "I'm not cooking breakfast because I'm a girl," Tracy shouted from below. "It happens to be my turn. And since tomorrow is your turn, Jason, you'd better not look so darn smug." Those two were arguing again. Kevin had to agree with Jason that the trip would have been more fun without Tracy. At least the rest of them wouldn't have to listen to the brother and sister bickering all day. To Kevin, who was an only child, it seemed a ridiculous pastime. He knew it annoyed his father, too, but Mr. Wilson was used to it and hardly seemed to notice. Well, since he couldn't avoid his father all day, he might as well sort out the fishing gear. As Kevin rose from the chair, a wave splashed up the side of the boat and made it rock. He heard his father, who was at the outside wheel on the stern deck, give a startled grunt. Despite Kevin's worries about fishing in the Bermuda Triangle, the ocean had been calm for the last 3 days. Nothing unusual had happened since they left Daytona Beach and headed east, skirting the northern edge of the Bahama Islands. Now, as Kevin grabbed the back of a deck chair to steady himself, he looked in surprise at the heavy seas. "That's strange," he muttered. They were in the center of a patch of ocean about 1/2 mile in radius that was building heavy waves. But beyond that, the water was still a flat calm. Kevin scooted down the ladder to his father. "What's going on, Dad?" he shouted. His father's face was grim as he battled the wheel. "Don't know, but you better ask Dave to call in for a weather forecast. If we're going to get much of this, we'll have to head in." But have you looked? "Do as I say, Kevin, now." A finger of fear curled around Kevin's heart. Even his dad was frightened. Grabbing the cabin door, he flung it open, and as he did, the boat gave a lurch, and Kevin went flying half over the port side. His father left the wheel spinning and was beside him in an instant. As strong hands pulled Kevin to safety, the boat seemed to jump, and Kevin's dad was in the water. "Man overboard," called Mr. Wilson, who had just come on deck to see what all the fuss was about. "Throw him a line," he shouted to Kevin as he cut the speed and turned back. Before Kevin could move, Tracy, whom he hadn't even seen come up, sent a donut lifesaver sailing over the stern. "Who went over?" asked Jason as he came through the cabin door, life jacket in hand. Then all four stopped talking and clung to anything they could grab as the cruiser pounded up and down, shaken from side to side as though the storm were a terrier with a rat in its mouth. The boat would surely be pounded to pieces if this kept up. Then the bow slammed down so hard that they all lost their grip and were knocked to the deck. Kevin seemed hardly to land before he was flung upward again into the air. Up he went, and still farther up. "When am I going to start down?" he wondered, and opened his eyes to a moving darkness. Now and then a thread of light flashed by, accompanied by a pinging sound. What? Oh no! The Bermuda Triangle! Even thinking the name made him stiffen and catch his breath. "I warned them. Both Dad and Mr. Wilson are just too scientifically orientated, that's all. Superstition, was it? What are they thinking now?" "Whee! I'm flying!" Tracy must be coming along, and it sounded as if she was enjoying it. Kevin let his breath out slowly, only then realizing that he'd forgotten to breathe. The streaks of light became wider and more frequent. He stopped with a jolt. He was sitting on solid ground in a small oval clearing with a wall of bushes all around. What on earth happened, Dad?" Jason asked in a shaky voice. There stood Jason, as tall and well-built as ever, but definitely not his tidy, controlled self. His hair looked as if it belonged to a porcupine. His brown eyes were about 3 times their normal size. His clothes were disheveled, and the life jacket that he hadn't had time to put on hung from one limp hand. "Maybe we're on Mars!" exclaimed Tracy, her hair bouncing and her big brown eyes sparkling. "Don't be dumb," Jason snapped. "There's no way we could travel to Mars in such a short time. Don't you realize that Earth and Mars are separated by 35 million, varying to 63 million miles of space? How could we have breathed? Did you think of that?" "Spare the lecture," Tracy cut in. "Are you okay, Dad?" she asked, as she offered her dad a hand up. "I think so," said Mr. Wilson, "but I've certainly never experienced anything like that before. How did we get here?" "Maybe it was a tornado and we're in Florida or Georgia or something," suggested Jason. Kevin was very relieved that at least he wasn't alone. But where was his father? "Dad!" Kevin called, jumping to his feet. "Dad! Have any of you seen my Dad?" "He was in the water," Tracy began. Fear settled in Kevin's chest and threatened to stop his breathing. "Dad! Dad!" he shouted. "Yes, he'd been in the water, behind the boat. Maybe he didn't land right with us." Kevin dashed into the bushes. A heavy, sweet odor choked him. Large thorns scratched his arms and tore at his clothes. The bushes were so thick he could see only a few feet to each side. Still, his dad did not answer. Maybe he'd been knocked out when he landed. Kevin struggled back to the clearing and dashed toward the other side. "Wait, Kevin," Mr. Wilson said. "Where is he? Which way is behind us?" Kevin blurted out, and without waiting for a reply, he went crashing through more underbrush. Nothing. He turned again and scrambled back to the clearing. This time, Mr. Wilson caught his arm. "Stop, Kevin," he said sharply. "You're not doing your father any good by tearing around like this. Now, all of you listen. Since we're not sure where we are, we can't know what we'll face while we're here." "Dad," interrupted Jason, "you sound as if you think we're on some other planet too." "I don't know, Jason. That's the point. None of us knows. So as I was saying, we must be prepared to meet anything. Just remember, each one of us has his or her own strengths. If we all contribute our strengths and work together, we can meet anything." As Mr. Wilson talked, Kevin kept peering here and there at the surrounding bushes. Which way should he look next? "First, we must see if Ken is nearby," continued Mr. Wilson. Kevin's blue eyes focused on him and held. "There are better ways of searching than running helter-skelter through the brush, Kevin." Mr. Wilson's matter-of-fact voice and practical advice had a calming effect on Kevin. "Jason and Kevin, walk about 10 feet apart and search the area on that side of the clearing. Tracy and I will search this side. And Kevin," he added, "I don't think you'll be needing that life jacket." Tracy and Kevin quickly removed their life jackets, leaving them where Jason had dropped his, and then the two boys set off as directed. More aware of his surroundings this time, Kevin noticed that the bushes were loaded with a small pear-shaped fruit, as well as bright red flowers that gave off a cloying aroma. Inch-long thorns accounted for his many scratches. After about 20 feet, the bushes thinned, then stopped altogether. Immense trees, 200 feet tall, towered overhead. "Hey, this is more like it," said Jason. "Dad!" shouted Kevin. "Dad, where are you?" Silence answered. Nothing moved. "Where are the birds?" Kevin whispered, awed by the emptiness under the trees. "Don't know." "Oh!" answered Jason, his voice cracking and jumping up an octave. Again the two friends moved forward. No branches held them back. The forest floor was a soft carpet of decaying leaves, with little underbrush. "There's another thicket." "I'll check it out," said Kevin. Jason stood back and waited, as Kevin knew he would. After all, he wouldn't want to risk more scratches and torn clothing if it could be avoided. Kevin struggled through the bushes to another oval clearing, remarkably like the one where they had landed, but this one was empty. As he turned to leave, a long piece of gray, weathered wood caught his eye. A hard tug broke it loose from the grass and soil that half buried one end. It was an oar. Kevin's scalp prickled, and the hair in his arm stood straight up. This proved it. How else would an oar get here? This was where people who disappeared from the Bermuda Triangle ended up. Heedless of the thorns, Kevin plunged back through the thicket to Jason's comforting presence. "Here, Tracy," Jason called as Kevin joined him. "Come on, Kevin. Something's wrong." Tracy came flying to meet them, dodging trees as though she were on a football field. She kept yelling even after she saw them. "Jason, come and help! Jason, they took Daddy!"